Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Catributors podcast. Today it's just Jedi and myself, and it feels like we don't have that much to talk about, but there are some bits of information.
Yeah, we debated whether we were going to just play ships this evening or actually have a go, but there's a few odds and ends to talk about, and some of it might not be stuff that is kind of been widely circulated, so yeah.
True. I mean, up first we have the dev blog about the return of the Convoy and some other bits. So Convoy is a game mode that has been introduced in the past, and they have now changed it because it wasn't that great.
I liked the principle, but I can't remember if it was the attackers or the defenders that were winning way more often, but it was one side that was winning much more often.
It was the attackers. Like it was
okay.
It was like the way Convoy mostly worked was right. So the defenders spawned sort of with the Convoy, and they basically spent the whole time racing after the Convoy because the Convoy was fast enough that they couldn't easily overtake it, while the attackers just needed to sink the Convoy ships and could ignore the escort and could probably position themselves and just intercept it. So it was in most of the time the maps were designed that at the very end there was a very nice choke point, so it was very easy for the attackers to get the Convoy.
Yeah, so what they've done differently this time, this is all what they're going to be testing on the 11.5 test server, so this is not necessarily completely final, but they are going to have either 2 or 3 simultaneous routes with, and it looks from the screenshot like 2 ships per route. So it'll essentially make it much harder for the attackers to get all the ships, but they're still converging in similar areas, at least based on that one screenshot that we have. So you will have to, you can't just blob up near the exit, destroy the ships quite as easily. So they're trying to throw it back into being much more balanced than the first iteration with the single convoy route. So we'll see how that works out. It might be much more interesting. You might, like on the I keep referring to this map, but it's the one bit of data they've the one sort of concrete thing of example of a route they've given. So 2 of the routes are relatively close together, and then one is sort of going almost next to the border and before swinging back into the center. So I think there'll still be an element of trying to defend or attack the most ships at once. But it ought to be, I guess, a bit harder for attacking teams to just easily wipe out the convoy ships and not even really have to bother that much with the defending ships necessarily.
Now, the thing that I'm wondering is, I haven't really found an answer to that yet, is what's the new winning does one ship of each convoy have to survive? Is that just the number of ships that has to survive? Or is it, if you get one ship of one convoy through, is that enough to win? Because that would obviously change that a lot.
Yeah, if it was just a single ship, that would maybe make it then a bit too easy for the defenders. So it will be interesting to see how they do that. The one thing they also don't mention is whether submarines will be in there. I'm guessing probably not. Mode where the consistent feedback has been like, yeah, if you're going to have submarines be in the game and make sense, convoy would be it. But no. So
there would be one major problem, and the thing is that submarines don't really have much of a counter right now. Imagine if you could get submarines in this as an attacker, and basically what you do is you just dive through the convoy surface and one-shot the convoy and be like, yeah, what you gonna do about it?
Yeah, I mean the screenshot does show CVs in the team lineup that they've got. So
how many CVs were in the last mode too? I think. Which was also pretty questionable because the carrier can very rapidly just strike and farm the convoy ships.
The defending ships were at least in a big enough blob that there was somewhat effective AA, generally speaking. I mean, depending how the defending team, if like they spread out, then the carrier would have had it a lot easier. But in this mode, when you're going to presumably have the defenders more spread out, it might actually make it easier for the CV to pick off, like if there's any undefended convoy ships, they're just going to be CV food. So, yeah, we'll see what this actually ends up being like on the test server, and if there's any changes come about as a result of that.
I mean, one of my main concerns is that, I like the idea that there are multiple convoys to protect. I think there's a lot of potential in that. My biggest fear is that, well, the player base is not known to be very coordinated, and I could see that just one blob moves with like... I mean, if the defenders only need to have one ship survive, one blob just following one convoy path would actually not be the worst strategy ever. But the attackers would then have to at least split up and attack each part. And honestly, I don't trust so you'd need to be at least a 3-man division so you can get one ship in your division to each path. Otherwise, it might just be sad.
Yeah, there's a lot on that question of what the win condition will be exactly. So, yeah. We still have some things unanswered that it would be very good to know.
I wonder if it's like right there on the screen, but unfortunately I don't speak Russian because I presume like the win conditions would be on the map screen, right? On the second screenshot. I just can't read any of it.
There could be, yeah. Maybe some information will pop up on Reddit. I know there's some Russian speakers on there.
I mean, anyway, we will see after the testing how... Generally, it's good testing new modes. I like the idea of convoy, and I like that they are going to multiple routes now. So
yeah,
whatever comes of this, it's good that they're trying.
It's good that like we're back to, because there was a bit of I'm trying to think how to put this. The game was a bit static for a while in terms of like new modes and things. So it's nice that we're back to a position where they are trying new things.
It's nice that they finally continued working on the game.
Yes. So then we have. I mean, we had the US destroyers being mentioned in the roadmap stuff. We actually have some pictures here, and like, yes, they look rather nice, I suppose. So you can go and check those out on the dev blog yourself. I think they are one of the lines that has been waiting for a refresh for a while. And it's kind of the case, and we'll actually dip into this a bit later. There was a Q&A with the art department / map department side of things, where they were talking about the process, and it's often really nothing to do with how old the models are, but these certainly are among the oldest in-game models that were still in the kind of original lower poly quality, which is also, it's quite nice to have them refreshed.
Is gearing now less fat? She looks a lot sleeker, I think.
I don't know. They do mention they will have a minimal effect on the angles of torp tubes, swing battery guns, AA batteries, and the hit point distribution among the different sections of the ship. So it sounds like there's going to be very, very minor changes, but not enough to actually like change how they play or change their effectiveness.
I mean, if a ship, for example, like gets slimmer, right, it would have it would change arming of armor-piercing shells and so on. So it might have some. I mean, if Wargaming says that it will have minimal gameplay changes, it's they aren't necessarily trustworthy on their interpretation.
You want to take down Paintersoul, do you?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and presumably other related ships will. Although I don't know if there's that many copies. There's like the black is basically the same model as the Fletcher, although I think that is actually wrong if I remember correctly. I think the black is supposed to look a little bit different than the Fletcher. but they never bothered making it look different. So presumably the black will use the updated Fletcher model, but will still be wrong. And the Yueyang is basically a gearing, right? So presumably that model will change as well. But I believe the Shenyang and the Benson are actually different classes and look a bit different. So I don't think it will affect any of the other Pan-Asian ones. Oh, the Kid. Someone mentions the Kid as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, the Loyang is probably going to change when the Benson model changes.
Oh, yeah. Loyang, that's another one. So, yeah. There's also a little note about the Pharaoh Islands, which is really just linking back to the previous dev blog.
I mean, I think there was a picture of the map at some point. I think they could have put one here too.
Yeah, if you click on the link, it goes back to the previous dev blog from early April, that is, and there's some pictures there.
They are about, like, they have a dev blog here linked, but it's just like it's art pictures, right? But like the map layout and the camp layout would be interesting.
Oh, you mean the actual? Yeah, no, we don't have anything about that yet, do we? No.
Since that map is coming to a close, that should be pretty much. They should know how it looks like.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I haven't included anything like that yet, but we'll see. Brawls. There's going to be 2 brawls in 11.5, and they're both going to be 1 versus 1, which I think ought to be relatively popular. People seem to enjoy the dual format. So first with tier 9 and then with tier 10 ships. So yeah, that could be quite fun if you liked that.
True. It will be heavily unbalanced, I suppose, but I feel like 1 versus 1 with the new German battle cruisers is gonna be a bit. We'll see. But if you can have a battleship with hydro, good secondaries, and torpedoes, it's like. And good concealment, right? So if you were to bring a Schlieffen, you have 100 meters. You can detect it 100 meters outside of its secondary range, right? So you can't really fight the Schlieffen without it shooting back with its secondaries. With the Hydro, it should be relatively okay against destroyers, and because it's caps, you can park your battleship inside the cap and have forced the destroyer to come to you in a sense. So it's going to be hard to counter that, I believe.
I think there's always the element with brawls of like. You might get really lucky with the ship you take versus the enemy ship, or you might get really unlucky. It's kind of I don't know how to describe it exactly. It's matchmaking toned up to 11.
Yeah,
does that make any sense?
Obviously the game isn't balanced on brawls. Like for the German brawlers were also very strong in the 3 versus 3 format, but at least you see a bit more diversity there. Because it's 3 versus 3. We'll see, right? Maybe there are some ships that work well.
It's only for a single patch anyway, and they'll probably go back to other formats after that. So it's nice to see them rotating the formats around a bit.
It's probably better than the 9. Like, the 9 versus 9 was an interesting idea, but the matchmaker is just so screwed in that mode.
That was basically just. That wasn't even really brawl at that point. That was just slightly smaller random battles.
Yeah, but random battles with unlimited division size. And the matchmaker doesn't really, we've covered this in the last dev blog where they said they increased the number of battleships and that they now took more care with divisions on both sides, which was a bit of a lie because you can have a 2-man division on one side and you can have a 9-man division on the other side, which is not balanced. And you can even have a 5 and a 3-man division on one side, meaning all 9 ships are division, and just a 2-man division on the other side, and things like that. And also, since it's a brawl, the matchmaker doesn't care about mirroring ships, which makes sense if you have fully pre-made teams because they bring whatever setup they want. But if it's just a bunch of random people and one team has 4 destroyers and the other one has 1, it's just not the matchmaker was really not thought through.
I think Brawl's always been less of a serious mode, if that makes any sense, though. It's always more a kind of a anything goes kind of format.
Yeah, but I feel like that format only works with small teams as well. Once you use it up to a
1
random
versus
battle.
1 is definitely like or 3 versus 3. You don't really have those issues in the same way. Anyway, should we keep going?
Yes.
Right, this caused me some slight confusion when I first read it, but changes to rental commanders. So this is for like clan battles and whatnot, rather than say commanders that come with things like Halloween events, which is what I initially thought, or things like the commanders you were getting with submarines. Do you still get commanders with submarines? I don't think you do at this point.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so you can't transfer them to different ships and retrain them rather. So basically, they're fixed with the rental ships. Or I don't know how it works with rental commanders actually. If you get the commander separately from the ship, I don't know.
I've never used rental ships, so.
This one seems like kind of a minor change. Like maybe people were exploiting this somehow. Were they giving out 21-point commanders or something?
It sounds like they maybe they repurposed their free rental commanders and used them elsewhere.
Yeah, if it was for that reason, I guess it'd be kind of understandable if Wargaming was like, no, we're not going to let you do that. Just have.
I mean, it could also be that rental commanders got removed, and some people spent money on them transferring to other ships, and then got them removed. So I don't know in which way people got screwed over, but yeah, minor change, I suppose.
Yeah, in which case they'd rather do this than like give people refunds of doubloons or something, I suppose. So then we have some 4th of July stuff. So this is a bit wacky. There's going to be a special Lady Liberty commander with a unique voiceover and a Lady Liberty, Statue of Liberty patch as well. Interestingly, the commander icon, they've given it the copper finish that the Statue of Liberty originally had, rather than the by now very much more familiar to modern people, or to today's world population, I suppose. The green sort of patina that it has acquired over the many decades at this point. It's over 100 years old at this point, something like that. So that's a nice touch. Although for some reason in the patch it's a kind of pewter grey. It's odd. It's neither the current colour nor the original colour. I don't know why they've gotten that kind of pewter grey colour from.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they just thought it fit better with backgrounds or with who knows what.
So yeah, I am very curious to see what this unique voiceover is going to be. We'll see.
I mean, it's
someone with a really broad American accent, or is it going to be someone with a French accent to represent the fact that this was a gift from France? Maybe.
Also, that's actually a good point. That the commander should work on US and French ships. That would make sense.
Yeah, that would actually be a really nice touch if they did that. I don't know if they're going to, but yeah, it would be a nice recognition.
The unique voiceover has certainly the potential to be cringy or to outrage quite a few people, as obviously here in Europe we can take things like that with a chuckle. But I'm really, let's say, intrigued by this.
I think they at least have the wherewithal to get, an actual American voice actor to do the voice.
Yeah, but Wargaming would have pretty easy access, I think, to voice actors for all sort of languages, and they don't always manage.
True. Yeah, things like the Canarias captain's Spanish voiceover actually being South American Spanish rather than Spanish in terms of accent.
And I think from what I don't speak Dutch. It sounds very funny for a German-speaking person, but from what I've heard, is the Dutch is very cringe.
To be honest.
Yeah, I think it's it might not have gotten a Dutch person for now.
Okay, interesting. Or maybe they did, but it was from someone from, like, I don't know, Friesland or somewhere with a more unique
I mean,
Dutch accent.
as I said, I don't actually speak Dutch, but I've heard Dutch people cringe about that. I mean, it's also just possible that they picked very weird phrases that nobody would say.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, the voiceover, the captive voiceovers, even the default ones, tend to be very bombastic anyway, and not really sound like how people would necessarily speak. So I don't know. We'll see. It probably is going to be played up a bit and not be done in a particularly straight or serious way. Kind of like, the sort of voiceover things you get for disaster movie trailers or thriller trailers, or that particular style of ridiculous voice that you only really find in that place. There's also going to be a pair of achievements for the 18th season of Clan Battles, which is a pair of well, it says they're going to be called Siren and Hurricane Siren, but they look more like salamanders. Or is that just me? Or is it like axolotls or something like that? I'm not sure where Siren is coming from, but yeah.
That's not how I'd... I mean, maybe there is... Like, I'm not an expert on aquatic life forms, so it's possible that there is an actual sort of life form on Earth that's called Siren and that looks like this, but it's definitely not like the mythological siren or that would come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm guessing that they were going for the idea of like sea sirens, but those were traditionally like scantily clad women luring sailors to their deaths on the rocks rather than, an axolotl.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't know. That one's a bit odd.
By the way, what we didn't quite mention is, have you looked at the San Diego Camo?
Oh yes, there's also going to be the San Diego Camo. Yes, again, the Statue of Liberty kind of theme, and it's interesting at the front. Actually, you've got the figurehead as the Statue of Liberty, and it's actually a mix of the kind of coppery look. Although honestly, it looks more like bronze than copper in that screenshot. But then the kind of the original, bright copper look versus then they've got some kind of highlights of the patina. So yeah, I'm not sure about the rest of it though. I'm guessing it's supposed to give an idea of what's the name of the island that the statue is on? Is it? It's not Staten
Island of Liberty?
No,
I don't know.
Gosh. I'm going to have to look this up. But yeah, I mean, with the stonework, though, I mean, it does look like they're going for that. The flag is a bit, but...
I mean, it's not quite as America as the old camos that I have with the eagle.
It's literally called Liberty Island, apparently. I thought it was called something else. Maybe it used to be called something else.
Possibly. I mean, it would have probably had a different name before they moved the statue there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it used to be called Bedloe's Island, apparently, so probably that's what I was thinking of. But, I mean, it's not bad overall. There's kind of like a bit of stonework going on. And obviously there's the big kind of flag blowing back along it. So, I don't know. It's a little bit gaudy, but it's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, I like the looks, personally. But I've always had I always loved special camos, I guess. At least most of them.
Oh yeah, there's also Ellis Island, which is that's possibly also what I was thinking of. Which is very close by and also rather famous. Right, so that's it for that dev blog. Then we have some test ships, some changes to ships.
Yes.
So, yeah, what have we got here? So mostly, I mean, changes to test ships we normally kind of skim over anyway. Patry, interestingly, is getting a bit of a nerf because that was pretty strong out of the gate. What they've actually done is they've removed the combat instructions It says removed combat instructions activated by F key, and I presume that just means it doesn't have the combat instructions mode anymore. They've also nerfed the reload time of the secondaries, and they have increased the speed boost bonus to 15% from 8%, but they've reduced the action time. So that one's a bit of a mixed bag, but yeah, the fact that they've just straight up removed the kind of super ship mode, the combat instructions, shows how much I guess that it was a bit too strong.
Also, then an interesting note atop of it is a change to the Iwami. Now, the Iwami is, if I remember correctly, supposed to be like a tier 9 brawler with the magic 100mm secondary sort of that they were going for with torps. I'm not sure how they went with the armor, but it sort of looked like they were going into a brawler direction with the ship.
And now they're giving it the same torpedoes, the 20-kilometer torps, as the Shima and the Yoshino.
Yes, which doesn't quite fit with the concept, but is an interesting choice for battleship. I forgot how many torps it has, and I also have no idea what the angles are, but
I would guess it's a single launcher, but I honestly can't remember either.
It's an interesting choice.
Yeah, and with that change, it's getting a longer reload as well, so you're not going to be able to spam them out or anything. But yeah, it's interesting. Even more 20-kilometer torps to dodge. So yay! Mecklenburg, that's getting a slight nerf to reload time, 25 to 26. Submarines, the maximum distance from an undetected enemy sub at which its own ping emission effect could be displayed is reduced to 1 kilometer. So what was that before, like 2 kilometers?
I don't know. It's a change that will do basically nothing.
Yeah. It does. It's not changing the survivability of subs at all, so therefore, yeah, it's not going to do much. If it's not a change to the homing torps or the survivability of submarines, then it's kind of playing around to the edges of the actual issues rather than addressing the actual issues. Although if they're really going to address the actual issues, they could just take out submarines altogether. But
true. That reminds me, like in the next patch, like they're changing you can't see the ping anymore, but they basically display a sort of effect on the water that's basically almost invisible where the sub is supposed to be. But from what I've seen from other people who tested this, is the effect isn't necessarily close enough that you actually hit the submarine if you drop depth charges on it. So it's so far away from the submarine potentially that you can put your plane depth charges exactly over the effect and not hit the submarine, even if it doesn't move. So it's a shit show.
Especially as they either have or are going to nerf the radius of damage from the airdropped depth charges, as we've mentioned previously. I don't think that's in effect yet, is it? Or is it? I can't remember.
They included that the outer edges do damage.
True, yeah.
There was some
zero damage condition isn't as likely anymore, but yeah. Then we have more nerfs to the United States and the Eagle,
which are very welcome.
Just in the form of how long it takes the tactical squadrons to come available, but yeah.
I mean, they could balance those tactical squadrons, or they'd be like, you know what, you just screw ships a little bit slower, because that makes it fine. Because in the end, that's like that. That's why the Wargaming tries to put the gameplay experience in a statistic, right? It's like if you like could one shot the ship, but it would need like 18 minutes to reload, then that'd be like, it's fine. You can only use it like once or maybe even twice a game, right? And on a statistic, it wouldn't look too bad, but the experience of, getting like one shot, it would never be fun. But that's really Wargaming's problem, right? They look at a statistic and they are like, it's not that the interaction with one of those squadrons is so bad and so problematic. It's like if the problematic thing happens less often, then it's all gonna be fine.
Yeah, because then it all averages out on the spreadsheet. Probably the most interesting thing on this is they're adding a test ship, the Connecticut, and it's unlikely that this just seems to be a thing like they've done previously, where they they make a copy of an existing ship, but they change some parameters, like they try out different things. So it's not clear if this is them considering changes specifically to the Vermont, which is going to be a copy of, or if they're maybe considering more general changes to the entire line, and they're just using this as a test bed. But it's going to, well, it says it has improved acceleration dynamics and stronger armor. We're not entirely sure what improved acceleration dynamics means. It's got the same...
also, by the way, is better concealment when you compare the stats, but it looks like it's the exact same as a Vermont, just with better acceleration, better armor, and better concealment.
Yeah. So I wonder when they say acceleration, if they're actually going to bring, like, if it's going to be something more like what the British light cruisers have, or do they mean more?
I think just more engine power, because maybe? I think like the engine power is like really bad on that thing.
I'm just trying to. Does it have engine power specifically?
I don't think it's a stat that you can see.
Wows on the fitting tool. No, I don't think it does. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what comes out of that. My hope is it means they're going to look at buffing the entire line, because
I believe it means they just want to sell an overpowered Vermont for money.
I mean, maybe it's just going to be, there's going to be some kind of coal ship, research bureau ship, dockyard ship. I don't know.
Let's be honest, Vermont is the only, I think, ship in the line that's actually decent. It's not fun to play, but Vermont is not a weak ship, because it has the high enough caliber for like the Overmatch, and it has good enough guns that it's a pretty decent long-range gun platform. The thing is, like, the Vermont is the one ship that doesn't need help, in a sense. So if they test anything on the Vermont, it wouldn't make any sense to test something different there and apply it to other ships. It really looks to me like they're just gonna be like, hey, you just want to sell a stronger Vermont.
Maybe. It would be nice to know why they're doing this. They're just saying they're doing it. They're not giving any reason why they're doing it. So, yeah, we'll see. No, my hope is it means that we'll get buffs for the Kansas, and maybe even the Colorado with a bit better acceleration would be nice. But yeah,
didn't they have like other, like, I think Connecticut is just a ship that, like, a premium ship that was previously been tested, but with other stats that didn't work so well, so now they're going with this?
Possibly, I can't remember. Certainly not the first time they've done this sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, it doesn't look like it that like the firepower's not changing. So
I mean, I've looked at the stats. I haven't seen anything like it seems same, like the same turning radius, same speed, same rudder shift, better concealment, same AA, same secondaries, exactly same guns. It's all the same except for better armor.
It would be like that's one thing.
Concealment.
The stats don't show really is which armor zones are changing or improving or whatever. So we kind of just have to wait and see with that one, I suppose.
But Vermont had, I think, if I go here with the wiki, right? The wiki says 19mm is like a low. Is it like, has it like a very weak nose or something? Because they say plating is up to 32, and when I look at the wiki, it says that the plating is like 19. So I presume they've just brought it in line with the armor with other battleships.
And they say plating. I mean, we don't know if that's going to be nose and aft, or is that going to be like?
Usually that's nose and aft.
Yeah,
but
it wouldn't be deck, because 32 would be kind of a low side potato. I can't even remember. I'm actually going to fire up the client and see. This might take a moment. I mean, it might be that like the survivability is lower than they would like on this line, and that's why they're doing this. Because one of the things with the I don't know what we call them, the super standards. Like if you pick wrong in terms of where you're going to go on a map, especially in a standard game, or even in a domination game, or if your allies all just die, it's suddenly you get kind of left out of place, and at that point you're basically screwed. or even if you get hard focused and you just don't have the maneuverability to effectively dodge out of the way. So it could be that is the reasoning behind this, is to.
But I mean, they're changing like the speed.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, I suppose like the speed is kind of one of the hallmark characteristics of the line, so it would make more sense for them to do this than go, right, these go 30 knots now.
I'm trying to find like the Reddit post about this, see if there were any. I don't think there were any.
So, fore and aft
there.
plating is currently 32. What plating they're referring to? Maybe superstructure. That would be very heavy superstructure armor.
Let's see. Has anyone read anything about the?
Yeah, somebody might have data mined this. The upper belt plating's 38. I'm just wondering what is being increased to 32, or unless the 32 just is referring to the end plating and it's other armor zones that are going to be increased, like deck armor. Deck armor would be a big one in terms of survivability, or the upper side plating.
I mean,
torpedo bulge, that's 38 millimeters. So I don't know.
That doesn't seem to be.
Have some detail.
It doesn't seem to be any information. Like nobody knows what's what's the point of Connecticut.
Yeah, this is almost, to be honest, this is almost going back to the bad old days of like dev blogs and patch notes when it was just like, we've made this change. Doesn't tell you, what changes they've made or why they've made the changes. So at least they've given some stats, but yeah, without further context, we really can't say. You say, well, we've given improved acceleration dynamics and stronger armor, and then don't actually explain what that means in some detail. It's kind of useless to then give, other ship stats that don't include those. So who knows? There's a bit of a question mark over that. We don't know why they're doing it, and we don't know really what the changes are. We just know that they are doing it. So 5 out of 10 for communication on that particular item, I think. You got halfway there.
Well,
so then I was just going to go on to the next one, unless you've got more to say about
No.
Yeah. So, more British battlecruisers, and I think these are the tiers we didn't get to see last time. So, Indefatigable at tier 3, which has actually got a really interesting turret arrangement. I think... what was it called? It's like... it's some French term. It's on something, but it's weird kind of cross-deck diagonal arrangement that was supposed to give better firepower coverage.
But they should on both sides, I presume.
Yes, to a limited degree.
You want to go for a broadside?
It also ended up causing some real stability issues, having these the barbettes or whatever right up against the side of the ship, essentially. So, yeah, it was a bit of a failed concept, but it's interesting to see it in game because I don't think we have any other examples of it. We do have other ships that have side-mounted turrets at low tiers, but I don't think we have anything in like this configuration.
I mean, the problem is that there are no players playing tier 3 anyway, so it's interesting as those lower tier ships are. You either play co-op or you sit 5 minutes in queue and then play co-op regardless, because it just feels a random battle with bots.
I suppose so, yeah. It's not going to affect most people. I think it's just more interesting from a sort of slightly historical point of view.
Yes, see, that's the sad part. There would be like interesting ships at lower tiers. It's just that Wargaming has made them so, phased them out basically, so nobody plays them.
I might be slightly wrong actually. The Koenig Albert and the Von der Tann have kind of the same layout, but I don't know if they have particularly good cross-deck firing capabilities.
Also, I
really wish I could remember what it was called.
I vote to rename this tier 3 to Impronounceable.
Oh yeah, Indefatigable is going to be an interesting one for the non-English speakers to try and
What's the meaning of that word? Like, is that an actual word?
Yes, it's actually. I think there's been actual ships named that as well, but it's also the name of the ship that some of the Horatio Hornblower ship books were set on. It kind of means. I'm gonna have to look up an exact definition. It's one of those words where I could use it in the right concept, in the right context, rather, but trying to give an actual definition is yeah. Now I have to actually spell it.
I mean, it could have to, like, obviously I have never heard this word before. Looking at it, like, there is sort of defeat in it, or there is fatigue in it.
I think it kind of means it's sort of like like tireless or undefeatable, or it's kind of supposed to be like that sort of yeah. Right. Oh, here we go. I found I managed to spell it correctly.
I mean, it could mean tireless, I guess, looking at the word.
Yeah. I think that's okay. Synonyms: inexhaustible, tireless, unflagging, untiring, weariless. So it's supposed to like it'll it'll just keep going and going and going kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely a very old-fashioned sort of word in English. You wouldn't really find it used in any context outside of referring to Royal Navy ships of that name.
Then an easier to pronounce battleship is the Renown.
Yes, I think everyone. Yeah, I think we knew this was going to be a tier 6. That's a good-looking model, I have to say. It looks like it's the refit Renown. Just
what was refit?
Structure. The ship was armed with underwent an extensive retrofit in the 1930s, which strengthened its armor and AA defenses. So this is. It depends which ship. I mean, this is going to be one of those things where you're getting into. Some ships were refitted slightly differently, so it's going to be like the Queen Elizabeth we have in game looking different from the Warspite because they both had different sets of refits. And I think the refit that the QE represents, I think only 2 of the QE ships had that, and others looked different. Or was it like 4 had that, and the other 2 looked different? I can't remember. But this might represent one specific of the Renowns. Or it might be more a kind of a little bit of a mix and match. How many were there? There was like 2 of them. Yeah, there was 2 of them.
What's interesting to me is that they say like that it has more AA, strength with its armor and its AA defenses, but you don't see much AA on the side. Like usually, I feel like on the side, like next to the tower, and so you would see an AA suit.
Yeah,
I presume it's all in the back.
This was an American battleship. Bear in mind, this is 1930s refit, so this was before the very, very painful lesson of, was it Duke of York? Or was it Prince of Wales? And was it Renown itself? I honestly can't remember, but the 2 that got sunk by the Japanese after their declaration of war, and, that were part of the ships that were supposed to defend Singapore. And that proved to be a very, very costly lesson for the Royal Navy in terms of not, just relying on the AA of capital ships, but also having much beefier AA on their capital ships, and making sure, especially near land, that there was air cover available for them, because they basically went out more or less unescorted. I think maybe there was some destroyers with them or something. And they didn't have any kind of land-based coverage. So when the land-based Japanese torpedo bombers just came at them in waves, they were basically screwed at that point.
Hey, I mean, at least it means that about 1 HE shell will disable all of your anti-air on the Renown.
It does have, I'm pretty sure, perched on top of one of the turrets, that looks like a unrotated projectile launcher. The same that you find on the hood. So, who knows?
Well, I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Anyway, that is a good-looking ship, though, I have to say. Really nice.
True.
10 out of 10 on the ship models, as per usual.
Then we have the Hawkett Tier 8.
Yes. Now, does it say what this is? I think they said in that linked. I think they've actually linked it. What they were based on? It might be one of these G3/N3 proposals, or the variations and designs that were around that. But yeah, it's actually got one of the more conventional layouts of the high tier ones. And at tier 8, 9 16-inch guns, that's pretty decent. That's on a par with North Carolinas and all the rest. So
I mean, it depends obviously on gun characteristics and reloads and such.
Yeah.
We actually have some stats for that afterwards.
I imagine these will not be the same 16-inch guns that the Nelson has. I would be surprised.
Good question. But I mean, there is, like, when we talk about those, the big elephant in the room, that those British battleships will benefit from the new torpedo turning mechanic.
Yeah, no, this is interesting because, and again, this is a thing I've gone and watched videos about elsewhere, is how they actually launched torpedoes from battleships, and they have this whole complicated deflector system for actually launching the torpedoes into the water that would actually extend things out the side of the ship. So it provided a buffer against the water flowing past, because otherwise you might end up with the torpedo coming partway out, and then the water, the pressure of the water going past kind of just sort of jams it in place, which would obviously be very bad for everyone concerned. So yeah, there's that whole thing going on, and then as it says, it's based on the ability of real life torpedoes. I mean, submarine torpedoes could do this as well. You didn't have to exactly have your unlike World of Warships, where you have that kind of narrow band with sub-torps and other well, I think the only other single kind of mounted torps that would sort of be in this category would be Mutsu with its very narrow angles. But yeah, that you could program torpedoes to basically come out and then make a turn. So that's a capability that has not been in the game up until now, but it looks like they're introducing it specifically for these to overcome the fact that otherwise you would just have these extremely narrow side-on torp angles that you would only ever be able to use if you were showing full broadside like the Mutsu. And obviously in a battle cruiser, you're probably not going to want to do that. So yeah, I think it will actually make the torpedoes more than just the occasionally usable gimmick as they are with Mutsu, which is nice to see.
It's something that we'll need to as like it doesn't say how much they turn, and basically what it says is that after the launch they will correct the course towards, I think, the selected target, and then they'll just go in a straight line. So basically, it's not like a submarine homing torpedo. It will just turn once and then like that, and keep going.
It's essentially, I mean, having been playing U-boats a bit, I don't know how many people here will have played that or seen gameplay footage, but yeah, that very definitely features this as a thing you do with your torpedoes. So anyone that's watched Cold Waters, for instance, even with the dumbfire torpedoes, you can still select a heading that's not necessarily, straight out the front of the ship kind of thing. So it's basically going to be that. You will be able to select a heading, the torpedo will pop out, turn to that heading, and then just go off in a straight line.
I wonder if you can, torpedo yourself with that.
I don't think so. I don't think you could make them turn that radically.
Well, it's weird to have a mechanic like that on Battleship, but I'm not necessarily against this. It's like, I wouldn't have been, personally, I wouldn't be opposed, as long as with anatomy, that you have different launch patterns for torpedoes anyway. I'd mostly be thinking about destroyers, slightly curved torpedoes. I would have no problem with that. Like if you set the curve and they go. Obviously, I'm not sure what this would do to the gameplay, but I wouldn't mind if options like this were in the game.
That would be a bit ahistorical, but there were things like pattern running torpedoes. I think the Germans had those. I don't know if anybody else had. But you would basically pop them out. They would go in a straight line, and these were specifically for use against convoy. And they would then enter. I guess you call it a search pattern, but not really. It was just like they sort of go in a kind of sine wave kind of line, or they kind of zigzag a bit more sharp. I can't remember the exact patterns, but essentially you would fire them, and if it was a dense enough convoy, it gives you an increased chance of, as it's going along its pattern after it's run straight for a bit, it would then have a greater chance of actually hitting something. So, I mean, that maybe could be a thing, but that would really only work against like fairly dense clumps of enemy ships in World of Warships, as opposed to very slow-moving convoys. But it would be interesting if we see this more applied to certain other ships that have very, very narrow drop angles.
I mean, honestly, if Wargaming has a mechanic in the game, they usually spread it far and wide. So unless this turns out horribly wrong, well, even then they probably spread it.
But bear in mind, these are going to be single tubes, and I think the Brits tended to use 21-inch torps, so we're not talking like abnormally large torpedoes or anything. We're not talking like Japanese long lance sized torps. So yeah, it's definitely going to improve the usability of the torpedoes, but it sort of depends like how quickly they reload.
I mean, for example, the Renown has eight torpedoes with 10k damage each, but not very fast and 6-kilometer range.
Yeah, so they're going to be fairly like. I mean, these are 8 single tubes, so it's presumably going to be 4 per side. There were even some earlier battleship designs, and we're going like back to kind of World War One, where you had fore and aft torpedo launchers as well.
But you have to keep in mind, it depends on how much they turn. So if you're like going sort of nose in towards an enemy, or how much side do you have to give to launch from one side and then turn and launch the other side? Obviously, with 6-kilometer range, you have to get fairly close. But
yes,
it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be a little bit of extra punch, and it'll make it a bit more dangerous for other people to get close to these ships. I mean, you look at Tirpitz and Scharnhorst with their 6-kilometer torps, you get to use them sometimes, so it's going to be nothing new in terms of gameplay. It's just the mechanic that has been introduced to make these torpedoes usable.
Yes, I mean,
because
the question is,
in games that have these underwater tubes that obviously aren't usable.
I mean, the question is how well are those ships going to hold up in close combat? Because 6-kilometer torpedoes is great if you're a brawler, if you can actually close the distance at times, but if you're getting wrecked way before,
you're not going to have the armor scheme of a Tirpitz or a Scharnhorst to work with, so we'll see. And those also have their secondaries to rely on as well.
Yeah, those secondaries are probably not going to be the best. So
I don't think this is going to be a major source of damage for these ships, but it could be useful, and it's going to make it a little more difficult for people to rush them. But yeah, they're not particularly powerful or fast torpedoes, and actually it does give reload time. So 95 seconds. So it's not going to be like the Mutsu where they reload in 25, 30 seconds. That's quite a long reload. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how that actually plays. But I think for actually using them, it's just going to be like using regular single-launch torpedoes.
It's also interesting that they've said in the past that they weren't sure which concept to go with those ships, and now they are trying out these torpedo tuning mechanics. So it's entirely possible that, like, since they're trying 2 different concepts with those ships in the first place, or at least I haven't heard anything that they've settled for one. There's a lot still up in the air when it comes to starts to the British.
True, yes. That's definitely true. So we also have announced the Huron, which is going to be a Canadian tribal. And I can't remember if... Is this linked to all of the stuff that happened with Little White Mouse? I have a feeling it might be.
Yes.
I think
it's still sort of non-apology ship.
Yeah. So this is going to be interesting. In that, I mean, we already have got the Haider at tier 7, but that has rather pitifully bad AA. And
it's not like AA makes any difference.
No, I know. This might have better AA, but it probably won't be enough AA to make any difference. But it's hopefully going to be better than... God, what does Haider even have for AA? Actually, Haider's AA is not that terrible. Maybe it's Cossack I'm thinking of that has really terrible AA. It must be Cossack. But yeah, it does know that maybe the AA is going to be a little bit better. We'll see.
I mean, that aside, what they are going for here is an open water gunboat, while stating that your guns are not going to work as an open water gunboat, which is, a pretty weird concept to have. But they basically state that the arcing trajectory of the main guns will facilitate firing at targets from behind island cover, but make it difficult to enemies at extreme ranges. So they basically state that you wanna get close or something, but it's not gonna work well at longer ranges, and they're giving it shit concealment and removing the smoke and forcing you to go far away and open water gunboat. So they have conflicting design philosophies already.
It is a bit odd. It's not like if you're expecting it to be a copy of the Haider, it's definitely not going to be that. I mean, no smoke. Long range Hydra, it says. Does it have how long?
They're only 500 meters more, I think.
Okay, because I think it's pretty. Where are we?
Well, but the stats.
Firing range is the same. Same single quad launcher, 8-kilometer torps. I think that's the same.
Yeah, it has 4-kilometer Hydra, which I mean isn't the worst at this tier.
Yeah, at tier 7.
But keep in mind that you have 7.1 base concealment, and you can't mount a module at this tier.
Yes, the concealment is definitely not going to be nearly as good as the Haider. The Haider is a pretty big outlier at tier 7. There's not very many tier 7 destroyers that have less than 6 kilometers concealment. There's Haider, there's Shiratsu, and there might be one or two others, but everything else is around 6.1 to 6.8.
Yes.
So it's not going to be like an outlier in terms of not great concealment for tier 7. But if you're expecting this to be super sneaky like the Haider, you probably will be disappointed.
Yeah, you cut down to what, like 6.4 or so with a captain, I presume? Which is about okayish concealment at this tier, but it doesn't make you super sneaky. The thing is, like they basically gave you the idea is that you have a long duration engine boost, and you are supposed to open water gunboat. What's your range?
I think the range. Yeah, the range is the same as the Haider, so that hasn't changed.
I mean, you can get the captain skill, but they clearly state that your shell characteristics are going to be very bad at range. So you're at this weird situation where if you want to open water gunboat, you want to be at range because that's your defense is dodging. But you don't have the shells to be at range.
I think the base reload is going to be at... Just looking now.
A half second better, I think.
Yeah, better than either Cossack or... Like, it's still going to have 6 barrels. 4.5 seconds is decent. It's not like a massive pew-pew boat, but that's not bad.
But what are the angles going to be?
I seem to remember it having quite decent angles overall.
I
but
mean,
I haven't played either of the Cossack or the Haida that recently, though, so I can't.
I think the Haida had like really terrible angles because it had relatively powerful guns, but it had to basically go full broadside to use them. But I could be misremembering.
Chat might be able to correct us if we say something horribly wrong about the So yeah, we'll see what that's like. Yeah, it's going to be more of a open water gunboaty ship, but as you say, I don't know how well the platform actually suits that.
I mean, it gets a heal.
Yeah.
So,
is there any other Tier 7 destroyers that have a heal? I honestly can't remember.
That's actually a good question.
That might end up being its most unique feature. Oh yeah, the Skåne, obviously. Of the Swedish destroyers. Of course, they all have heals. I think that's it, though.
Possibly.
I don't think there's any possibility of taking on the Soviet line, which is that's only that it hasn't. That's where it splits. So it's the Minsk. The Minsk definitely doesn't have a heal. I can't remember any of the others having a heal. So yeah, that like if it's a better heal than the Skåne gets, that like maybe the Skåne is the thing that we should be comparing it to, really.
Well, but the Skåne has better like torpedoes. Like it's a bit more torpedo focused. So
they're weak, but they reload quickly, and you have a very good range with them, and they're pretty fast.
Yeah, and I mean you have I think 6 or so on the Skåne, but this thing has 4.
True. Yeah, you've got the same single launcher as the Tribals had. So it's the torpedoes are definitely a secondary consideration. It does seem to be much more about the guns. So we'll see how that works out. It might not be quite as versatile or fun to play with as the Haida, which is, to be honest, I mean, it's one of those ships when I see one at Tier 7, like generally speaking, it's somebody that knows what they're doing. And without 5.7 concealment, it can be an absolute little terror.
True, but you run into them very, very rarely in my experience.
Anyway, moving on, we have what I think is the original design for the Agincourt. I think the Rio de Janeiro.
No idea. It's a unique 7-turret dreadnought built in Great Britain for the Brazilian Navy in the early 1910s.
Agincourt, and it's the only ship I can think of that does match it. I mean, the superstructure looks a bit different, but yeah, I think it is. I think it's the original configuration for the Agincourt, because what happened with the Agincourt, it was being built for Brazil, and then World War I happened, and the Royal Navy went, right, we're going to need all the ships we can get, and basically, or was it no? It was going to be built for Brazil, and then that fell through, and then Turkey was going to buy it. I think that's one of the factors that led to Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, coming in on the side of Germany and Italy, and not Italy, Germany and Austria-Hungary. So yeah, I'm just looking at the Agincourt now. Yeah, it's the same turret arrangement and same hull and everything. So yes, this is what the Agincourt was originally going to have been in South American service. So it has notably got that kind of bar structure above the mid turrets, but otherwise it looks pretty identical to the Agincourt. Some minor differences with superstructure, but that's it. So it's kind of going to be what we have in the game already, but they do note that it's going to be more HE focused. So they say it's going to have high damage HE shells, and it'll have good armor pen. Presumably they mean with its or do they mean HE pen? Presumably they mean HE pen. The AP shells, however, are weaker than those on battleships of the same tier. but it's also going to have no AA like Agincourt does.
Nobody has anti-air this tier.
That's true, but it has that effect of players, if they know that you have absolutely none, sometimes you will get carriers going for you specifically, even though effectively...
I'm not sure if that is an actual effect. It just feels like it, because it doesn't matter what ship I'm in.
I know.
You can be in Texas and they just keep going for you.
In reality, it doesn't matter, but I have had that happen enough that I know there are some players out there who do think that way. They're seeing Arkansas Beta or an Agincourt or something with very, very low or non-existent AA. They will prioritize you because they know that dodging is your only defense. They don't risk losing any planes whatsoever, even though effectively it's no different than if they went after some other battleship. So
look, I've been focused in a Harland, in a Des Moines, in a Worcester, I've been in a Worcester, and the enemy carrier only attacked median. It's like the anti-air does not really filter into carriers' decisions these days.
That's kind of generally true. So just looking at it versus Agincourt, it's got a better main battery range by nearly 1 kilometer.
I mean, they state that unlike Agincourt, Rio de Janeiro has more accurate main battery guns, better HE shells, faster reload time, but also weaker secondary.
And I presume weaker AP as well. I mean, do they actually give the AP shell stats? 8100? No, that's the same. Maybe it's when they say weaker AP, I don't know.
I mean, it could be like penetration mechanics that we can't see.
Yeah, it might be more of the hidden stats. 76 millimeters of penetration on the Agincourt. So I wonder if this 32% fire chance, that's actually one less than the Agincourt. Or have I got a flag on the Agincourt? I don't know. I think if we're looking at the description, it sort of on face value looks like they're describing it versus the Agincourt, but no, I think the main battery is basically, aside from the possibly the Sigma. What's the Sigma of the Agincourt?
Probably really bad.
You're basically going to lose the completely standard secondary range for the tier, but your main battery might be a bit more accurate, or you get to fire main battery a bit more often. I don't know, but it's going to be just a fire spitter if it's the same characteristics as the Agincourt.
I mean, they basically mention it outright. It's supposed to just set everything on fire. And 5200 has a pretty scary AG alpha, I suppose.
Yeah, if you get, I mean, I've played the Agincourt a bit, and it's kind of fun at the tier. The AP is still very usable. I mean, bear in mind there's lots of not very armored targets at that tier. If you get same tier or maybe some tier 6 targets, you get certainly broadsides. The AP could be really very effective, and the extra range and the extra reload is not going to hurt at all. I mean, it's a variation of a ship we already have in game, but it's interesting to see it as a kind of historical what if the ship had been built and delivered to the Brazilian Navy as was originally planned, kind of thing. And it's a way for them to add something into the Brazilian or the South American ship line. So yeah. Let's see.
Then we have the Hampshire.
Yes. That's a big increase on. Sorry, I was comparing the Sigma stats. 1.5 for the Agincourt. So 1.7 is still not great, but it's a big step up from 1.5. So, yeah. Watch out for the Rio de Janeiros when they appear, I suppose.
Just bring something to barbecue, because you will be on fire.
Yes. Anyway, yes, Hampshire. So that's the last thing they mention, which is it's going to be an AP only. It says development of the Surrey class, which were, I think they were one of the subclasses of the county class heavy cruisers. So this was obviously some kind of proposed way of sort of taking the design and extending it a bit. And it's actually, it looks like just comparing it to the Surrey, it's obviously longer, and it's got essentially an extra turret at the front. So it almost looks like a kind of weird hybrid of the Surrey and some of the Japanese cruisers that have got the forward turret arrangement.
Yeah, I was thinking something like a TAG or so with the forward turret arrangement.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna be interesting.
AP always kind of limits for a heavy cruiser anyway, kind of limits the interest and effectiveness. But it is going to have light cruiser acceleration, 2 quad torp launchers. I think is that what Surrey has, or has it got triples? No, it's got quads, which I think are in the same place. Yeah, hull mounted towards the rear. Presumably, the armor is going to be not too different from what the Surrey has. And then they go into a bit about conventions, which is a thing they've been doing recently. It's always funny when they give like one paragraph about the characteristics, and they do like 3 or 4 paragraphs on why we chose this name. So it's a nice bit of information, but it would be nice to.
Well, I mean, they do give the stats.
Yeah. If we had more kind of anyway, so.
It's gonna be interesting because it's a 15.7 range, which is not the best, and it has AP only. So and it's weak armor, so it's a cruiser that you want to play at range, but at range AP only can be a bit tricky.
Yeah, it's that like the fact that it's AP only is what makes me think this is going to be kind of niche. I mean, it's not like you get that many dedicated players of the British heavy cruisers anyway, to be honest. So it's already a bit of a niche market, but the fact that they've then made that AP only, yeah. Is it going to be especially stealthy?
12-3 detection. I mean, 12-3, you have it. It's 8, right? So you have the concealment and the module.
So we'll be able to get that down to probably around like 10?
Yeah, should be around 10. Maybe 9-8 or so.
Yeah, it'll be sneaky. But I think for a lot of people, the AP only is going to be the make or break characteristic, because one of the few good things about the British heavy cruisers is that they tend to be like the shells themselves have got a pretty decent chance of starting fires, but the overall like that, if you compare them to things like the French, where you get better range and you have faster ships and better armor, or like Japan, where you tend to just have more barrels available and better torpedoes to go with them. Yeah,
they just have nothing special going for them.
Yeah, so it's like that's their one sort of strength, is that they're sneaky and that they can be decent fire setters. But if it doesn't have the decent fire setting, then I'm not sure. I'm not sure this is going to be a particularly strong ship, to be honest. I mean, it doesn't make up for it with any special consumables. It's just the usual damage con, hydro, defensive, and a fighter/spotter.
I mean, like, that's a lot of 203s with better angles that could be rather scary, but I mean, obviously it's harder to use armor piercing than the now explosive. I can just spam, and at range this is always going to be tricky to get the good hits. But well, we'll have to see how good those.
It will be advantageous in certain specific scenarios. But there are also going to be lots of scenarios where it's going to be a major disadvantage. Anybody with any decent amount of armor that's angled, and then you're stuck trying to hit the superstructure. And that's going to be especially true of battleships. Even things like if you get broadside battleships and you're trying to aim for upper belt, there's a high chance you'll get the shells not going where you want, or they'll just shatter or whatever. So, it's, to be honest, I personally would really struggle to be interested in this one. It kind of feels like they've found something in the archives somewhere and decided to slap this AP only gimmick on it.
I feel like I'd be interested to division it maybe with a smoke vacuum position more aggressively and use armor piercing, because I like the British light cruisers. But they are very flexible when it comes to their smoke and very easy to position aggressively. It's what this thing is lacking. If you're forced to sit at long range, I would probably not want it. But if you division it with something that allows you to get closer, why not?
It does. One difference between the main branch is it does have the option of a fighter instead of a fighter, or and adjust the spotter. But to be honest, I think you would probably just go with the spotter always anyway, especially at tier 8 when having a somewhat limited range on a squashy cruiser, can be a very painful experience. So
yeah, but keep in mind that you boost your range of your armor piercing. That's going to be plunging fire at that range, and that 203's plunging fire aren't going to be that impressive with armor piercing.
So yeah, it honestly just kind of feels like a bit of a, like, how much effort went into remodeling this versus an entire new ship, because it really is just a stretched Surrey with a little bit of the forward superstructure removed and an extra turret put in there. It kind of feels like they came across this when it's close enough to the Surrey that we can do some remodeling without starting from scratch with an entire new ship, and hey presto, we have ourselves a tier 8 premium we can sell.
Yeah, well, I also keep in mind that the stats are subject to change. They could very easily slap high explosive on it if they feel like it's needed.
Worth pointing out, I suppose. It would be a fairly major change if they went from AP only to giving it also HE shells, but yeah. Yeah, if this had HE, I would actually find it interesting. This would be it would be maybe more comparable to like the 8-inch Megami, for instance, or Atago or something like that. But it very notably does not have a heel, so that's always a limiting factor with your squashy tier 8 cruisers. So yeah, I feel this one is pretty niche. AP only, no heel. Yeah. Right, that's that for that page. Can I just say once more how nice the Renown looks, though?
Definitely.
They've really done it justice. That is it's got some lovely looking lines on it.
And now imagine just like a bright pink camo on it.
Yeah. So,
that was it for the dev blog.
Yeah,
so there are two other small tidbits. So there is one thing that I really wanted to talk about, and this is, people might have seen it. There is Wargaming released a video on why we need UX research. Now, at first I was confused what UX means, but it's user experience, right? And they have about 22-minute video about how they research the user experience, because we all know Wargaming doesn't seem to care an awful lot about user experience and doesn't filter it into the decision making an awful lot. And there are, you can all watch this video yourselves if you want to. There are basically two things that stand out to me. First, they seem to have a user experience research department, and they only do surveys and sort of what they call the lab live testing, however they want to call it. Basically, they invite people over to their facilities and creepily watch them play World of Warships. I mean, you see it in the video. You see a person that plays and there's somebody else like sitting right next to her. I think she has a notebook or so, just staring at the person playing. I would feel slightly awkward doing that, but be that as it may. The thing that stands out to me is that in the whole user experience video, they don't mention things like, the forums, the Reddit, the contributors, or any feedback they collect. They'd be like, yeah, we have surveys and we invite some people over to the studio to play some Warships. The one thing about inviting people over is like they do things like eye tracking and so on and try to figure out what people focus on while they're playing and so on. But what I want to point out is that they have to be people close to their studio, which means it's a very small geographic location where they invite people to come over and play. The next thing is anyone you invite over to your studio to play and is like watched and monitored while doing so is not gonna behave naturally in any way or form. So anything you get from this is highly suspect in the first place. The other part, like about the surveys in the video, is that obviously, like, the developers don't actually see the survey results. You have this whole department that goes through them and compiles them and forwards the relevant bits. They say they take out the emotions and only forward the facts. Whatever that means, I'm not sure how much of that gets lost on the way. So it's like for what I'm saying, that they have like this whole user experience research department. They seem to have awfully, like, it doesn't feel like they actually try to collect user experience. That's what came from me, right? They try to. It's once again Wargaming thinks user experience is just a spreadsheet, right? Basically, the whole department is putting user experience in a spreadsheet. They are compiling sort of spreadsheets for the developers.
I have to say, I have to kind of disagree with you a bit. I mean, for one thing, I think it's useful to define that when we're talking about user experience, they really mean the UI, the interface, like the nuts and bolts. So just for anyone that's thinking they mean kind of more general gameplay experience, they really mean.
No. I mean also general gameplay experience.
Well, I mean they did say that they include some stuff of like that in their surveys at the request of other departments, but.
Yeah, I mean their job is to compile everything that they can. Like they show even.
I mean they also do all the stuff like compiling the survey data and putting up but stuff like the eye tracking and the in-person stuff like that. That was very specifically focused on.
Yes, on the UI.
How you're looking at what bit of the screen and information that pops up and how people use that and whether people notice it and stuff like that. And I kind of take what you're saying about it being quite artificial in nature and having a kind of a limited pool size of people they can invite to the studio where they have all this stuff set up, which is presumably St. Petersburg. And they had one or two anecdotes in there as well about people coming in person and being kind of nervous about it and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's like, well, there's kind of not really any other way to do it. And so long as they're treating this as a limited sort of data set, they're not like basing things on it too heavily. That I personally think it's fine to do it in this more kind of personalized way. I mean, they did specifically... in the video, they show people, watching the people playing from the other room as well. So it's not the whole gaggle of developers peering over a guy's shoulder as he navigates through the port or anything like that. But I think in the proper context, it's fine, and it's maybe more like this whole video is maybe more interesting as a kind of a process video of how they do things. As a bit of extra information for players, but it's I don't know. It did to me feel a bit like filler content. Like there wasn't really anything groundbreaking or earth-shattering, or necessarily that interesting. They didn't really present much in the way of like hard data or particular. Like they had very few examples of what their collation of feedback and their research. The changes that's actually implemented in game. Is that sound meowing in the background? Yes.
That's also something that I thought interesting, because they were specifically asked to provide examples when the feedback of the players changed what they were doing. And the examples they could come up with is that they made a tooltip or so that you can zoom in, because new players weren't aware of that, like at the early stages of the game. And it's where like they couldn't actually come up with a recent example, and they couldn't come up with an actual gameplay example of how they did things. And they also, the one thing about how they like evaluate surveys when you put text in. So they have bots searching through the answers, and if there is a certain keyword that comes up a lot, then this is what they will focus on, and then go manually through the answers and compile the information out of them, which we obviously showed a site that's basically had sub, half of the screen was filled with sub, like, and then the submarine and so on. Which basically shows that most of the feedback is about submarine. It also mentioned that in certain surveys, people just use any text, for instance, they can get a hold of to try to provide feedback that's not asked about, because they get asked in the survey, hey, do you think this port looks pretty? And they're like, guys, I want to actually provide interesting feedback here. Like, I want to have certain issues addressed. And you're like, people just misuse those to just give different feedback. And it's like, yeah, because that's what the people care about. Basically, this whole thing was awkward it's like they don't care. The thing that I got from this video is that Wargaming has a very inefficient way of gathering feedback, ignores the actual feedback, and just puts up it's like I don't know how you can spend a lot of money without getting any results and ignoring the actual problem. That's what it feels like to me.
On the one hand, I can see like that specific thing where they were saying, if they're asking specific questions, if somebody gives an answer that's completely not related, I can kind of see why they would then disregard that. But you would hope they at least would have sort of general notes going on to the developers of, like a bunch of people mentioned this, even though the survey is not about that sort of thing. So. But we don't know. They may just discard that kind of data completely. I mean, one thing they did point out was that a lot of people treat it as though it's kind of being personally read by all the developers, whereas it does. And this is one of the more interesting points. Is everything goes back through the user experience department to basically be kind of digested. So stuff like the tick box surveys or the radio button surveys, where it's kind of very defined answers. It's very easy to collect that sort of data. But then you've got all the people putting things into text boxes, which that kind of have to be read individually, and you have to kind of make some kind of gestalt out of that potentially quite varied, feedback. Individual feedback that people are giving. So yeah, they did mention that they use various scripts to do things like pull out word clouds to see what, like words that get mentioned a lot kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, it was a bit interesting, but it was still not that interesting overall.
Yeah, because the main part of collecting feedback is missing. It basically showed they don't understand what user experience means, I feel like. They don't understand people. They treat everything as a spreadsheet.
I will give you this. Watching this video, did not really get the impression that this has a substantial impact on how the game is developed. This might be an unfair criticism of the video, given that it was in rather limited scope, but there wasn't really a lot of emphasis on like the user feedback, the player experience then shaping what happens in the game necessarily. It kind of felt more like, well, we take all this stuff and we digest it and collate it and break it down for the developers, but that's it. It then goes off to the developers, and does anything happen? I mean, it just felt like, this is the intermediate department that does this one thing, and then nothing necessarily comes out of it. So yeah.
I mean, it would have helped if they'd gotten like more recent examples or more meaningful examples, and not like, hey, like 5 years ago, this one thing we put to the developers actually got something done. Like, if you wanna,
some very concrete things they could have used, like the experience of what happened with the Graf Zeppelin, for example, or they could have talked about feedback from submarines, or there are lots of actual highly relevant examples they could have used, and we got this kind of very bland, broad overview instead.
Also, one funny note that I want to mention is that they mentioned specifically in the video that when you ask a question, you have to be very specific, because if it can be misinterpreted. And they also touched on the problem with languages. So if
they asked something in Russian, and it was taken as like asking about
basically negative. The word average is not meant as average, but in Russia it basically means bad. So basically what they thought meant bad, the Europeans thought was average. Like there was a miscommunication between bad and average, basically.
It did give a little bit of, like, it would have been interesting to get a bit more insight into that, because I suppose we do have to bear in mind that they are covering quite a few different language groups, and all of the feedback and surveys and whatever. They have to have people that can read and translate all this stuff, and it's all the surveys and whatever they put together has to be translated into a bunch of different languages, and they have to make sure it means all the same thing, all the different languages. So that was the one kind of glimpse we got of that. Actually, it could be potentially quite a complicated subject. So. But they could make this video so much more interesting and so much more relevant. Really
there was a beautiful irony in that statement, because they specifically said that you have to be very careful, because if somebody misinterprets the question, he's going to give an answer. He's going to feed you wrong data. So you have to be very clear with exactly what you ask. And for the warships, not sure if it's still to this day, but until very recently, at least, you can sometimes after a battle you get a pop-up with how much you enjoyed that battle. There is no way that this question isn't misinterpreted.
No context at all. Yeah.
There is absolutely no context. So basically what they said in this video is this is the worst possible thing you could ever do, is ask such a broad question. So this video tells you that the one thing that Wargaming has been doing since launch is the worst possible mistake you could ever possibly do in gathering feedback. So that I find ironic, because the Department for User Experience told you that they are using the worst possible thing they could have ever done.
That data is apparently completely useless. So there's no purpose whatsoever except to make people think occasionally that they're being listened to. I guess.
I thought it was a beautiful piece of irony
there were some other things they talked about, like how often they put these out, and they try not to do them too often. To individual users, because that way people just start completely ignoring them. But they
end up in spam folders.
Surveys get ignored far more than others, and so there were some interesting tidbits in there. I suppose people can go watch it themselves if they want. But shall we move on? We kind of thought we weren't going to manage to talk about much this evening, and here we are already approaching the 2-hour mark. So the last thing is, and we'll probably not go too much into detail, but there was another official World of Warships Discord Q&A number 4. This one was all focused around maps and, well, more the art department, basically. So there's nothing particularly substantial there in terms of like gameplay stuff, but there were one or two interesting bits. And also, they did take the time to point out once again that there is no singular art department; that it is a sort of conglomeration of like different teams that do different bits and pieces. So let me scroll and actually find the Discord.
Yeah, I'll have probably trouble bringing it up myself, because Discord is using our video right now.
Yes, you can't kind of do both.
So I rely on you to provide the.
So
the first thing that I can mention that I remember is because it's still so funny to me is that Wargaming insists that they don't have an art department, and it seems that they have insisted past in the live stream and again, like every time people praise the art department, Wargaming is like there is no art department. I'm not sure why that's so important for them to tell everyone. They're like, there is the art department. Like there is this group there that we don't call a department that makes art, and there's this group there that is not a department that makes art, and don't call those guys a department. Don't give them too much power. They already beloved too much.
That's it. That they're worried. They're worried that you know that they'll get too powerful. They'll execute a coup from within or something. There were I don't know how many questions there were, but they answered a bunch. Let's see. I'll go over. So stuff about the USDD models. And they give some prelim pictures of the Farragut, Sims, Samson, similar to what we saw on the devlog stuff.
Yes.
So there was a question about detonations looking different, similar to World of Tanks, and this is possibly a question that's been. No, I've just realised a thing. I'm looking at a thing. This is the previous one they did. Hang on. I'm realising I've made a boo-boo live on stream. Well, that's good.
And people thought we were such professionals before.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, this is the last one they did. Oh, I did not notice the dates on this at all. So this is a thing that we've probably covered previously.
Yeah, we talked about one of those in the past.
Yeah, I think I read through it, not noticing the dates whatsoever. So really, we don't have anything to talk about. It's just I read on the portal that yes, there is going to be another, but I guess it's not actually taken place yet. No.
But there might have been some answers we haven't covered before. Like what they mentioned is, for example, that the port is slower than. I mean, they gave some explanation why the port is slower than the actual game and why it might be more hardware intensive and so on.
I'm actually looking at the portal. This is what confused me. I looked at the portal, saw that there was going to be a Q&A, and then looked on the Discord. And, oh, look, there's a Q&A thing in the archive section. It must have happened already. That was my thinking process. Didn't notice that the dates on the Q&A were 2021. So, yeah, it just shows that. I mean, November 2021, it's been a while since the last one. I'm just looking at the portal now. It's from the 12th to the 16th. They're collecting answers, and then they'll have answers posted by the 24th. So we will be able to talk about this in future ones, just not now. Well done, me. This is wholly on me. But I mean, we can like this. It's interesting looking at this and seeing that some of these things already have come to pass. So the stuff like the USNDD models and there's other stuff that hasn't come to pass yet, like different effects for ships being detonated, rotatable turrets.
I don't want that ships don't disappear after sinking and so on. I mean,
not rotatable turrets, the rotatable funnels on some of the French battleships. It was interesting to refresh myself about stuff that hasn't on that basis, I suppose, hasn't actually come to pass. There's a bunch of stuff that hasn't, and some of these things have. And there's a bunch of stuff that they said, they're still working on, so we might still see them happening. So stuff like RTX support, and that is being worked on for the next gen console version. It might eventually, they take that tech and use it in the PC version, for instance.
It's not like that's something we really need.
Yeah. There's other stuff like camos on planes. We know that's happened.
Yes. There's also clarification that if you see like waves or so on the ship, they don't actually have an impact.
Yeah, I wonder if that was prompted because Drachinifel did a video probably late last year. I think it might have actually inspired this question, and I highly recommend this. But it was about the sinking of the hood, basically, and going over the various official kind of reports and theories, and looking at some of the other kind of hypotheses people have come up with. And his hypothesis was that that because it was going at speed, you're better off going and watching the video. But essentially, that the shell was able to hit Penn where it was because there was a kind of trough created by the bow wave, and it kind of effectively lowered the water level because the ship's going forward, the ship's pushing water out of the way, so you've got this little kind of curved inward dip next to the bow that the shell probably or possibly was able to hit there and Penn. Otherwise, where if the ship had been going slower, it would have hit the water and detonated sooner. And so that someone was asking, does this have an effect in game? And the answer is no. It's purely a visual effect. That would be kind of an edge case thing, really. There was some interesting stuff in there last time, and we probably covered it last time, but we will certainly look at the next one. And
Definitely.
We'll see what comes about as that. And, if you are using Discord, you can actually go to that article. If you're not, on the official server already, you can actually go in there and contribute your own questions, because there is, just looking now, there is the active, maps and game modes is the current Q&A. So, if you have specific questions regarding that, you can go and ask and potentially get an answer. So, I guess we can end things there. Well, that was a derp on my part, but oh well. Not the biggest one I've ever made, but still. Slow clap for me.
Yeah. Well, they do have, you were half right. They do currently have a Q&A up and running. It's just that we don't have the answers yet.
Yeah, I was a bit premature. That's all. I got all excited and then looked at the archive instead of the actual current Q&A questions channel, because I'm very professional. We're very professional on this podcast.
I mean, we are very professional cat minions, at least.
Yes.
So I guess we can just end it here then.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to wrap things up.
So thanks everyone for watching. We will be back next week. And have a good night, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Bye.